So once again, we're going to continue now. Dear panelists, if you can just take your seats. We're now going to continue our final panel discussion of this edition of the European Space Conference. And the focus will be space as a pillar for an autonomous European shield. I'm pleased to invite the moderator for this session, Managing Editor for EU Affairs at Euronews, Tidey.
I'll go over there. Hello? No. Hello and welcome to this new panel, so the last panel of the day, which is called Space as a Pillar for an Autonomous European Shield. If I could ask the panelists to come on stage, that would be great, and perhaps if you could sit roughly where your pictures are, that would be great. Hello. If you can, but otherwise there's a seat there, and otherwise you're very far from me. Hopefully there are Hopefully there are enough microphones for everyone. You might have to share. All right. So with me on stage today we have Marjolijn van Deelen, EU Special Envoy for Space at the European External Action Service. We have Guillaume de la Brosse, who is Head of Unit for Defense Policy at the European Commission's DG DEFIS. We have we have Michel Friedling, who is co-founder and CEO of LookupSpace. We have, and I apologize, I'm going to completely mispronounce your name, but that's okay, Rafel Jorda Siquier, founder and CEO of Open Cosmos. Then we have Jaume, also mispronouncing, yeah? Jaume Sanpera, who is the CEO of Sateliot. We have Lubos, Fedora, who is Senior Sales and Business Development Manager at Mynaric. And then we have Clément Galic, who is co-founder and CEO of Unseenlabs. Perhaps, to make it easier for everybody here, I'm going to first ask the 5 companies here on stage to do a quick elevator pitch. This should be fairly easy. I'm sure you do that all the time. Explaining what your company does so we all have an understanding of what you do. So if you want to kick us off, that would be great.
Thank you very much for being there. So yes, I'm co-founder of Unseenlabs and CEO. At Unseenlabs, we are a radio frequency monitoring company. So we have deployed a private constellation of 19 satellites to monitor the spectrum and to gather SIGINT and elite solutions to our customers. To date, we are working the maritime domain awareness domain, and we are basically able to catch the signals and the position of boats without any kind of beacons on board. So we have a fitted product for dark vessel detection and tracking. We have launched our first satellite 7 years ago now, so we are fully operative, working worldwide with the biggest navies and governments in the world. And just to close, this year, big step for us, we're going to expand our business markets with new type of satellites, still RF sensing, starting in Q2, I hope this year, regarding on the rockets, to expand our business outside of maritime domain awareness, but also to propose some purely defense and land applications to track and find emitters on land, GNSS jammers, any kind of defense systems, and so on.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. So I'm Lubos Fedora. I work for Mynaric. Mynaric is a manufacturer of optical communication terminals. Right? We are one of the world leaders, I would say, in mass manufacturing these terminals. Right? We have built over 350 of the terminals last year, and we're building around 20 a week as we go through it. Right? We've invested heavily into mass manufacturing, so bringing this technology to the market, to the satellite manufacturers, right, and to the users of satellites. Right? We have done this through designing the terminal from scratch in a way that it can be mass manufactured, and then we have heavily invested into some vertically integrated parts. For example, our mirrors, where we do those in-house, starting from raw materials, going all the way to finished, polished, and coated mirrors. Right? We do all of our manufacturing in Germany. We're based out of Munich. Right? and we provide then solutions for space, right? This is the key part here, but as well as ground and air communication. We're focusing on LEO on our side and expanding into MEO and GEO solutions as well.
I'm Jaume Sanpera from Sateliot. Sateliot is a company that we created 2018 to connect the standard devices that are out of coverage of the terrestrial operators. We have done 3 funding rounds. We have among our shareholders the Spanish government, Indra, and Hyperion, the dual use fund. Up to now, we have been dedicated to IoT. We have 6 satellites already flying. With these satellites, the 20th of September last year, we connect for first time in history. It's the first time that a LEO satellite connects to a standard device, a standard chipset of NB-IoT or 5G IoT. We have, apart from a high priority filing, we have already 30 countries where we have landing rights which are regulatory clear, and agreement with 60 MNOs all around the world. Starting next year, we are launching generation 2 of our satellites, which is in a vertical integration, fully designed at a manufacturer in Barcelona, where we have our headquarters that will be not only able to connect IoT devices, but D2D in a 5G new radio standard. This is very important because against 4G satellites that today exist, 5G new radio means much more efficient in the use of the spectrum and the capability of connecting video, audio, and data in real time. We keep growing our workforce. Today we are 120 employees, and we will be more than 200 by the end of the year.
Thank you very much. Rafel?
Good afternoon. My name is Rafel Jorda. I am the CEO and founder of OpenCosmos. And at OpenCosmos, what we do is we design, manufacture, and operate satellites to understand and connect the world. We've done satellites for Earth observation, telecommunications, even some advanced scientific satellites as well. Our offering consists of 3 different things. One is delivering full end-to-end missions as a service. So if you are in need of satellite infrastructure delivered very reliably and very fast, we are doing that. Second offering is everything related to imagery and data. So we have a large constellation called the Open Constellation with different sensors, hyperspectral, multispectral, at different ranges of resolution that is capable of capturing a lot of that data and process it through the Data Cosmos platform that brings the insight. And just last week, we announced that we are also working on the connectivity world. We have been acquiring some companies in the IoT space, like Connected, and we have been given very, very high priority Ka-band global spectrum from Liechtenstein that we have brought into use already a week ago, launching the first 2 satellites of what we believe will be a transformational constellation and geopolitical asset for Europe.
Thank you. Michel?
Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So the first time I came here was in 2020. I was wearing a uniform. I was the first French-based commander, and I think I was the first ever military speaking in this event. So today I have a different uniform. I left in 2022 to found Lookup with Juan Carlos Dorado, previously head of the SSA Space Safety Department, the French Space Agency, so bringing to the table the best of the civilian and military world, and to design and build the capabilities we were missing in our previous positions. So today we have developed very complex and expensive object, which is a ground-based radar to detect and track objects in low Earth orbit. The first one is being commissioned right now in France mainland, and we are starting the deployment of the 2nd and 3rd radar in French Polynesia. We will deploy a network of 7 radars around the globe using the French overseas territories. And this is a system of systems, so we have also a digital platform, which is, in my opinion, C2 for space domain awareness. I conceived and designed the system to be this system I was missing when I was at the Space Command. So these are the two pillars of the solution that we are providing to our customers. Today, Lookup, it's 100 people, highly talented. It's a 70 million of funding in 3 years, and it's a very exciting journey.
Okay, brilliant. So thank you. Now we all know exactly what you guys are doing. I'm going to turn my attention to our two institutional speakers here. So the theme of this, panel is about the European Shield. So the European Space Shield is a flagship project that's included in the European Commission's Defense Readiness Roadmap, but we don't really know anything about it. There's hardly any details. So could you tell us a bit more about the vision for this shield and therefore the sort of capabilities that could potentially be included in the shield? Marjolijn, if you want to kick us off, yeah.
All right, thanks very much. It's a good question, and I have to say it's work in progress. But actually, the Defense Readiness Roadmap that you referenced was a joint communication together between the Commission and the High Representative. And there we already set out what we want to achieve. And that is to have the space capabilities as an EU to be able to protect our citizens, but also to be able to protect our assets in space. So that's what we will need to do. In the conference, but also in many other sessions, we hear it's very clear what we need for that. We need PNT. In Galileo is the PRS for governmental use. We need space-based ISR. We already have the work that SATSEN does in terms of intelligence. We're developing the Earth Observation Governmental Service. We need secure communication with IRIS². But we also will need SSA and SDA to be able to make sure that our assets are safe, or at least to observe, as well as early warning systems. Now that is a lot. And what we need to do is to determine with the users of that, which will be the defense community mostly, also civilian side, but mostly it's meant for security, that's why it's a space shield, to determine what it is they need, for what parts they will want to use the EU space program, how we then arrange the governance. And what's interesting in that is also how that relates to the PCA. So that's the space as a strategic enabler, was already mentioned in the White Book. This is an area where very much the member states have the lead, logically. They are looking at how they want to advance space in the EU as a strategic enabler for all other capabilities. And that makes it really complicated, because you want to see how those two are complementary, but also have to take into account that we use those space capabilities for many other purposes, not just in itself, like maybe drones or ammunition, which you just stock up. So this is something that's different that we need to take into account. Also, that space is dual use. Another element we need to take into account. So we really need also those governmental users to set out their needs. So that's a process. Mm-hmm. And that's why I don't think that we have come up with a blueprint of it yet.
Would you like to react, Guillaume? Would you like to add something?
Compliment. Yes.
Okay, compliment.
No, indeed. But just like coming back to the Defense Readiness Roadmap, I think, what the Commission and the High Rep did there was flagging, signaling to member states, to industry, certain capability areas where there is a need to really pool resources, because we do consider that member states on their own would not be able to achieve the critical mass. So that was about drones, that was about the air shields, that was about space and the Eastern Flank Watch. So, and again, this is where we wanted to signal to member state industry, cooperate, because alone you will not get the impact that we can get all together, and because this is where we need to pool resources for the benefit of the EU 27 security. So that was very much the driver behind those 4 flagships. Now, indeed, space is a bit of a different animal, because the Commission and the EU space program is doing so much in support of space. So, and that's why we have this work to be done together on the space shields. And I think indeed here there are two objectives. One is how can we leverage space for defense? We see, that space is really a strategic enabler for defense, about intelligence, it's about positioning, it's about secure communication at tactical level for the military. So we see, space is not just a critical enabler, but we can't operate in defense without space assets, right? So that's one. And two, the second objective is how can we defend our space assets? On one side, they gain strategic value, meaning that their exposure to attacks is raising as well. So we need to protect as well our defense assets. So I think we have those two key objectives. Now, again, one of the peculiarity of space is we have two legs to achieve those objectives. So one is, of course, the EU space program. And we've done a lot already in the past, developing certain services, government services for defense ministries. And Galileo PRS is really the precursor. So now we have secure connectivity in the pipeline. We have reflection on this Earth observation government service. So we want really to push boundaries to the maximum when it comes to using the EU space assets to develop government services. But then we have a second leg, which is the defense programs. And the beauty of such space shields that we need to prepare together is to have a consistent framework so that member states, industry understand how we can combine the two legs, the EU space program and the defense program. And on the defense side, we've done a lot as part of the European Defense Fund. So we've funded research and development, covering all the different verticals. But now with the new instruments, European Defense Industry Program, we can do much more, and we can do what we call the EDPCIs. So this is really a collaborative framework where member states would collaborate in developing, procuring, operating assets together, and we see that very much as a complementary tool to what we can achieve through the EU space program. So I think that communication that we need to prepare together, this action plan, is really there as well to provide a clear and consistent framework and to set the travel of the journey in the years to come, leading to the next European Competitiveness Fund, so the next MFF.
So as we've just heard from our two speakers there, the whole point of the European Space Shield being included in the communication is that they wanted to signal to the industry that we need more from space. Have you received that signal? Do you feel like that signal has been communicated well enough from the EU institutions, from the government? Because many of you already worked with governments. Have you had that signal? Have they come to you and say, yeah, we're going to need a lot more, we're going to need you? Or do you feel like it's still a bit nebulous what they want from you guys? Rafel, you can kick us off.
Yeah, I think that the need is pretty clear, that it's there, right? Then how it's going to be implemented and those defense programs and the space programs working together, I think is what they are now figuring out and putting into place. But the need is obvious. The capabilities in Europe, across Europe, I think are there and coming up strongly. We shouldn't shy from the sort of technologies and capabilities that we are building. And the most important thing, I believe, is bringing them together in order to be able to protect all of us better. So we are eager, actually, to see how these programs are come together, and the industry, also across geographies, comes together in order to be able to serve, right?
Jaume, you want to
I fully agree with my colleague, Rafa. I think that there is huge technical knowledge in Europe, and I believe that not just at the European level, but also at the national level, there is a need that has been expressed this last month, much more highly, okay, in order to get all these capabilities to connect from space in mobility and in fix on the different aspects of the telecommunications.
Maybe I touch on it on a slightly different note, and not to be too provocative, right? I'm just a supplier to the satellites. we haven't seen that. We haven't seen that need be filtered down, right? And instead, what I feel is like the industry, like Open Cosmos, like Sateliot, is coming up with ideas, right? And then going to the institution saying, we have this, right? Can you guys use this, right? Can you have this extra capacity, extra capability, and make use of it, right? Rather than seeing it filter down and say, okay, as EU, we need this, right? Can you guys develop this for us, right? On the other side, I have seen very good support from the national space agencies and from ESA to come in and to develop new technologies, right? But I haven't seen them then be utilized as much as I would like in the industry and in Europe.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah, so obviously, yes, we saw the emergency and the need for new solutions and at the European level, for sure. I'm still wondering how are we going to achieve it? Because it's still unclear, but it's going to be clarified for sure, but still unclear which are the ways for commercial companies to be efficient, the communication and integration in European systems. And I say one risk of starting a new project or equivalent is to redevelop existing capabilities. And as you said, it's just the beginning of this shield, so I don't know what is scheduled, but I would say let's not forget that in Europe we have multiple companies, private companies, with solution in space. So the first step could be very fast. First step could be, okay, let's aggregate the operational commercial solution we have. On top of that, we can add patrimonial solutions, everything live in space now, and we can work on the next level of solution to develop new solutions through ESA, Commission, or whoever is able to do it. But if you want to win time, and I guess time is the problem right now, we should settle all at the same table and find an efficient and a quick solution, and I guess we have it on the table.
You raise an interesting point, which is that startups or companies can react very, very fast, but institutions sometimes take a lot of years to come up with the right plan, right? The institutional works can be quite slow. So what precisely do you need today from institutions in order to meet the demand you expect them to ask for in the coming months and years?
Maybe following up on the previous question and then transitioning to this one. What strikes me in this event is that everyone agrees on the same assessment and conclusion, geopolitical context, the need for agile and quick solutions, the need not to disperse the resources to avoid the fragmentation. But let me be a little bit provocative. I don't see how it is going to be done, actually. We still continue to disperse resources and to fragment. And this is great that at the policy level, the job is done and is well done. There is a momentum. But when you are an entrepreneur like us, you face always the same problem, meaning that, the French, they want a French system. The German, they want a German system. The Italian, they want an Italian system. The want an American system. And at the end of the day, you don't help companies, agile companies, emerging companies having nice technologies to scale solutions and to become a big player and providing many countries with solutions. So we are not European companies. At Lookup, I often say that we are proud to have been born in France, but we are proudly European, but it's not enough. So my dream today would be a European company, not a French company. I know that for my French colleague here, it's a bit provocative, and the other problem is that, for small companies like Open Cosmos, mine, and many others, it's very difficult to access to the financing. The procurement processes are very complex, long. The procurement cycle are very long, and then from the policy intent to the concrete things and the capabilities coming to the member states, to the space commands or space things, whatever the name, it's a long time, it's a long shot, and sometimes you fail.
Is that a common problem for you? Yes?
Yeah, no, I would like to compliment. First of all, maybe I'm a contrarian, I am seeing the world through another eyes, but there is no financing problem in Europe. Full stop. I am not finding it. At the moment, I have more money than what I need in order to scale the company. We are growing 3x year on year. We've been profitable for 5 years. Last year, we closed contract north of 170 million. And now, we are raising extremely big amounts of capital to build a transformational telecommunication constellation in Ka-band for Europe and for the world. That's the first thing. The second, yes, Europe is diverse. Europe has different capabilities across its geography. But we are proving at Open Cosmos that pan-European companies are possible. We have factories in Greece, Spain, Portugal, UK, all of them thriving. Right now, they are shipping tens of satellites as we speak. We have capability distributed across Europe now to manufacture 200 satellites a year. So we need to, I think, open our eyes and start thinking that those capabilities are already here and are ready to serve. And then, just to link to the last point that was done before, I think it was your answer to the previous question. Yes, as business people, we always love to see a clear plan, a clear path, a predictable route to recurrency, to solid. But I am not waiting. In Europe, we cannot wait. Industry needs to take initiative, take risks, invest. Everything in profit that I've been saving and putting aside for a rainy day over 4 years, I have invested in 3 months into bringing up these 2 transformational Ka-band satellites that bring into use one of the most valuable pockets of spectrum that there is out there. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't been saving that money, because probably if I had been waiting for an European program to pay for that, the spectrum would have been gone. But now we have the chance actually to put this capacity, this capability at the service. And maybe to answer your question, which is like, what are you asking for? Help me scale further. I don't want to build a 1 billion, 2 billion sort of company that then is acquired by someone else. That's the past for Europe. We want to build transformational companies that can serve real needs and that can scale into transformational global companies. So from Europe, we can partner through strength, through capabilities, through being able to offer to others what they need. And there is a lot of need for what we have in Europe in the world.
Okay, I'm just going to go to Clément quickly, and then I'll go back to Guillaume and Marjolijn, because there's plenty of things I want to ask you off the back of what was said already.
Yes, thank you very much. We'll be very quick. I totally agree, actually. I wanted to state, and you took the words out of my mouth, that at some point, industry, and we are part of the industry, must also take our risks. We cannot wait to get requirements and funding from ESA or Commission for the whole life. It's not doable. It's how you lose time. So yes, we have to take our risk. We have to develop our constellation, subsystem, or our core business, and we have to tailor it to be able to be ingested easily for final users. So yes, we cannot wait everything from governments or public entities. And yes, we need to work on our side to be able to accelerate. We do not have the same rhythm in private and public. It's like that. It's not going to change, and it's for good reasons. So, totally agree. Let's take our risk. Let's finance ourselves some part. And at some point, we must reach the business, and we must reach not funding, but contracts and solutions with commissions.
So I'm gonna go back to Guillaume and Marjolijn, because there were several points that were raised here, and I think one of the interesting points was raised by Michel, which was about fragmentation. You know, it's great. This is very positive. They're saying, you know, Europe is thriving, we can grow, etc. Where some other companies are complaining that actually 27 countries, it's harder to grow, etc. In a European space shield, we have 27 countries. So how do we reconciliate all of that? How do we put that together? That obviously raises questions, for instance, about governance. That raises questions about, as he said, you know, some governments saying, no, I want a French system, no, I want an Italian system, or whatever. How do we go forward with that? How do we bring all of this together? And how do we govern a European space shield? If you want to start.
I think it's really clear that we all need to come together here. And I think that was the message this morning in the keynote by Benedicta von Zeher-Tos. We need the member states with their capabilities, with their investments. We need the EU space program. We need to identify how this fits in foreign security and EU defense policy. So we need to work with the Council. But we're also working with EDA, that's working on defining military requirements. So that with industry all needs to come together somehow, and that's urgent. I think you mentioned the role of industry. I think it's really important because it also informs us on what's out there. But I would really like to start with the demand. We need to know what our users need and then facilitate that we get to that in a way in which we have a vision. So not just all individually, not just all space program, but in a very coherent way. And that vision is exactly what we're building right now. I popped in at the EDA annual conference just before, and that was all about intergovernmental cooperation and intergovernmental processes. Of course, words are easy. It's much harder to make that work, but I think we have the instruments and the experience here at the EU to get there, and a sense of urgency is now also very much there, including at a high political level. It's just one more point is this about this avoiding duplication, ensuring complementarity. That also brings us to the term interoperability, something I've heard a lot around this conference, but also in the past. I think it will be one of our key issues of the coming year. Might also be, it's important how we cooperate with NATO, so how we set standards, how we make sure all those systems get to talk to each other. To govern sensitive systems, member states will have their own requirements. It will be different from how other space systems are operated. We have a good example. It's in the governance of SATSEN. So this is an example that we're looking at together with member states to see whether we can use such a platform to build on and maybe even improve.
Guillaume, would you like to add something?
No, I mean, to add a few points, so for me there were like three key remarks: speed, fragmentation, transformation. So on fragmentation, in a way there are three avenues ahead of us, and maybe a combination of the three, but there are three avenues. So one is to go solo. Member states promoting their national champions, buying their stuff, so we remain small and happy, but small, right? Second option is the EU avenue. So we try to maximize what we can do all together through EU-owned assets, and we try to push for the development of government services based on EU-owned assets. And I think this is an avenue that seems more natural for certain verticals than others, but we need really to, I think it makes sense to really push to the maximum here. And then the third avenue is ensuring that member states cooperate. Again, it's not about EU assets, but member states developing assets together to ensure that it's not about fragmentation, but that they develop assets together, they operate assets together, they share data together, so they have, common platform. And this is where, again, the defense instruments can make a difference. So first, we have SAFE, the Security Action for Europe. We have we went through the national plans, and it's quite interesting to see that certain plans will be used to procure together space assets or space services. So we see that certain contract will be placed, not just to legacy players, but to new players. So that's good news, and it's about common procurement. And then we have, again, this EDIP and the European Defence Common Project of Common Interests. We can start small, and it can gain importance for the next ECF, but we need to start somewhere, because that will be the platform for member states to develop, operate assets together. And that's why it really makes sense to consider that, so that we avoid the trap of the fragmentation. that is a big drop ahead of us. And here we very much rely on member states. So as you know, you have a capability coalition led by France, by France and Italy, and you have other member states in that capability coalition. So this is the natural avenue for them to kind of think in terms of what could be potentially an EDPCI, where can we pool resources together, develop things together. So, and again, as part of that, we can do lots of things. It's about using EU budget for support to common procurement, for industrialization, for developing new products, for developing and procuring infrastructures. So there is a full menu of things that can be done through EDPCI, but key is do things together, minimum 4 member states. Then speed. Yes, I mean, that's a bit the difficulty here, because on one side we have this defense readiness 2030. We want to be ready for 2030 for good reasons. We have intelligence services telling us some countries may be next in the queue in a couple of years, so we need to be ready. And we know that space, again, is an urgent need for some member states that do not wait for us at EU level to take decisions, right? They act, they buy stuff. So that's why there is a bit of a race when it comes to ensuring that we'll do things in a consistent manner. But fully agree that there is a bit of a unknown in the equation here. Because for us, the big financial firepower will come with the next MFF. We have the European Competitiveness Funds, 130 billion dedicated to space, defense, raw material, internal security. Big customers will be defense and space. So the big financial firepower will come a bit later. And then the third element is transformation. I think our industry globally has reached a certain point today in terms of maturity with new actors that I'm not sure we can run programs the way we used to run programs a couple of years ago. And I'm quite sure that it's a bit about an iterative process. It's not just coming to the industry saying, this is our requirements, comply with that. I think we need to be smarter and understand what the industry is capable of, providing, like rapid technologies, and what can we onboard very, very quickly. Because again, we don't want to develop assets that will be operational in 10, 15 years. We want assets in the coming years, an asset that will need not be outdated when coming into when
isn't that a bit of a shift for the EU? Because we've had Commissioner Kubilius just here a few minutes ago saying experts are telling me Iris2 is going to be even better than Starlink. Great, but Starlink's been operational for 5 years. So do we tend to make grand plans that take too long when really what we need now is for the EU to say, okay, we don't have the fully developed plan, but we just need to get cracking and then build on that. Is that a paradigm shift that the EU is willing to operate in order to scale up fast?
Well, again, I don't want to preempt what the decisions will be, but we know that for certain verticals like Earth observation, there are many players, many commercial players on the market. So you may want to start, in tapping into that potential before developing more, other types of capabilities. But that's a decision to be taken at later. What I'm saying is, we need to take into account the transformation of the space and defense industry, by the way, when thinking about that space shield.
Rafel, you wanted to jump in.
Guillaume, what you shared, it's music to my ears. To be honest, I think that's what we need in Europe. To build around the capabilities that are ramping up and so on. And you mentioned IRIS². IRIS² is going to be a phenomenal system. But until we get there, we are here to serve. We are already launching, we are not waiting, and we are happy to contribute that also to IRIS² in to whatever form or capacity is possible. This is what Europe has to be about. How do we build these capabilities, deliver them quickly, taking risks, putting our own skin in the game, our resources, and then having that alignment that Guillaume was mentioning. Those capabilities, when they are there and when they serve a purpose, a need, will be utilized because they serve a purpose and a need. And we have barely talked about the shield, right? What are the needs of a shield? You need to be able to see, to understand. You need to be able to have things deployed on the ground that work. And you need to be able to communicate all of that in real time, because things, when you have to protect, need to happen very quickly. Europe has all of these capabilities. I would say more. Even in a, as you said, a small company like OpenCosmos of barely 300 people, we have demonstrated that we have already those capabilities flying. We have launched very advanced Earth observation satellites, entire sovereign constellations for countries like Greece, Spain, and so on. We are delivering that we would be really happy to bring into a shared mutualized system. As a matter of fact, the vision of the Open Constellation that we launched 6 years ago, it's very aligned with that, right? So you can sense, you can measure. Then you are IoT. You can start touching the ground, understanding what's happening, deploying that very efficiently in terms of narrowband bandwidth into all sorts of autonomous devices. And then you have broadband. And when you need to pass tons of data point to point in a secure way without touching other infrastructure and running analytics directly on the edge, on that satellite infrastructure that doesn't touch any other cloud, doesn't touch any other infrastructure, I can also say it now. I couldn't say it 3 weeks ago, but now I can say it. We have that. We are launching a constellation that is bringing that to reality. And we need capabilities like the Mynaric for the intersatellite links. We need capabilities like IoT payloads. We need all sorts of capabilities in order to make that possible. But we are finding that in all of the ecosystems where we are, in Greece, in Barcelona, in Portugal, in the UK. And what we need to start thinking is how we bring the best of each one of those components to make the best shield possible, right? So we are really well protected. At least this is my perspective.
So Rafel, clearly very pumped and optimistic about the European ecosystem. That's great. I feel like Michel might dampen your spirit a little bit. Michel, you wanted to come in?
I'm unapologetically very optimistic about what we can do in Europe, indeed.
Yeah, go for it.
Just maybe a few thoughts, very short. I know with what talent and intelligence Guillaume is leading this, and and obviously we are grateful for this. But again, when we talk about having capabilities in 5 years, for me it's much too long, and it should be in 2 years or in 18 months. And there are some capabilities, like Rafel said, and I think the big difference between big primes, I'm not throwing the stone to the big primes, but mostly they wait for requirements, 600 pages of requirements from customers, and then there are tenders, and they apply for the tender, there are consortiums, and so on. The difference with young companies like us, we raise money and we develop capabilities because we have a pretty good idea of what could be done and what are the operational uses, and we use the private equity and sometimes grant subsidies to develop this capability. We don't wait for a requirement, and we are ready. And this is what Rafel said. We are ready. We are here. Just use us. Don't, because most of the time what we can see is, okay, this is great what we've done. It's amazing, but then we will have a tender, and then we will have to make room in the big consortiums with the big primes, and then it will take 5 years, maybe more. And this is I think this is I don't have the secret sauce or the magic trick to counter that, but how we can leverage these emerging companies having solutions that can fit most of the users' needs and scale and become European players and global players. How do we build the European Anduril? Or the European, Helsinki is already European, but this is the point actually.
Jaume, you wanted to react?
I think that the huge risk is to balance the danger of fragmentation, which is enormous because every country is thinking on the same services at their own, and the market, not just the public market, but also the private market that is there. If you go too slow, the market will be gone. And this is a reality, and then it will be too late, and we will have constellations and services just dedicated to government, which is never efficient. Then we need to balance the speed to capture the market. We have seen it in IoT. In IoT today, there are 5 million things connected. We have already signed for 10 million things, twice the market that is already there. And just because we didn't wait anybody, we just went there, we launched our satellites, and we try our capacity, and we connect these devices from the sky. Then in D2D, it's exactly the same. The D2D, the market is huge for government users and for private users. And if we wait, okay, to have all the countries together to decide what they need, it will be too late. Then it will be again, wait, and again we'll build a constellation that will be just for government use, that will be outdated, but the people will have the obligation to use it because it's the one we decided all together.
So going back perhaps to what you said, sorry, I'll just switch gears slightly, but I'll bring you in shortly. You mentioned that it might be hard for some European companies to grow, right? Because you start small and then you have 27 different markets, or when you go for public procurement, you might be too small, or you might be, sniped by someone else. So, and then we have to reconcile that with the issue of sovereignty, right? The European Space Shield needs to be a sovereign asset, right? It needs to be something that no other third country can operate a kill switch on or anything. So, for you, do these two problems, the problem of scaling up and the problem of sovereignty, would it be solved with the European preference? Is that something that you would champion for a European Space Shield? Is that something that you would ask the authorities to look at seriously, to first favor European companies, even if they are more expensive than, say, a Chinese or an American competitor? Jaume or...
For sure, yes. Okay, we could not, these capabilities, we have to have it here in Europe, but at the same time, we have to be super competitive. Then balancing to choose European among the others, it's a must in order to allow them to develop. And I must say that today, as a European company, we have an advantage. We are seeing that Europe doesn't want to depend from third countries, but there is much more regions in the world that sees European as neutral, okay? And they want to have service of a neutral player as Europe in order to have their critical communications.
Lubos, you want to jump in?
Yes, so on the European aspect, yes, 100%. And I think we're already seeing that, right? Most of our requirements for European programs include the fact that we need to be European, right? To include the fact that we need to manufacture and do all of our work in euros. So I think that is very much there, at least from our point of view. I wanted to also touch on the fragmentation and the interoperability that you guys mentioned, right? Maybe is a capability that we can bring to you, right? So we have capability now that provides optical communications, right? And we can do this in any wavelength, right? You can do it in any modulation, in any data rate. And most importantly, you can switch this in space, right? So you can launch things now, you can launch them quicker, and then the future satellites that come later, or if there's another country that comes with a different modulation, you can switch that in orbit, right? So you can try and reduce this risk, right? And that's what we've been doing from a designing to one scalability, right? Because if I can switch between any standard, any modulation, any wavelength, right? I can build the same product for everyone. So we've already been thinking about this problem ahead of time, right? To prepare solutions that both our customers, right, and our parliaments can then use and utilize to bring these capabilities into play a lot earlier. Right?
Rafel.
Jaume has said something very important that I would like it didn't pass unnoticed. Europe's neutrality in this multipolar world matters a lot. And last week, I was in Davos and I heard the speech of President Macron and of President Carey in Canada as well, mentioning that this rule of law and this neutrality, if we bring up the capacity and capabilities, will be desired by many. Because in this multipolar world, people do not want to depend on a single individual.
So what you're saying is actually being European might be a good selling point going forward if China continues to be China and the US under Trump continues to be...
Yes, and sorry to say it, but you can talk about countries or you literally can talk about individuals that take those decisions. So even I think that people in those countries, companies, corporates, and enterprises in those countries, the US itself, might be worried about all of it depending on a decision of an individual. And in Europe, we can build a lot of strength through that neutrality, rule of law, calm behavior, but drive and purpose for global good. But we need to be able to partner from a position of strength. And sorry to say it, but sometimes we are too cynical and too skeptical about ourselves. And it's about time that we realize that we do have a lot more capabilities than what others and even ourselves think, and that we put the resources behind it.
All right. Michel, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, your question was about the European preference. So I cannot imagine that you will find any of us on the panel saying, no, I'm not pro European preference, as well, obviously. But my point is that what does it mean, actually? And what apart from that, we would benefit from this? It means that this is European jobs. This is increasing the industrial defense base. This means R&D. This means economic growth for the European continent, so European Union. So it means that, and for the taxpayer, I would say, should be obvious that we should buy European capabilities. And the other point is that what I've seen recently, and the Russian invasion in Ukraine was the first trigger, but not that important. The second trigger was Trump 2. Mm-hmm. Trump 2 was the second trigger, and recently with the Greenland affair, we've seen an increase in the commercial traction that we have in other regions than Europe. So if we don't have this European preference within Europe, we don't leverage the capacity we have, and we don't help building these champions that are able to address the needs of these non-European countries looking for non-American capabilities, and this is a huge demand today.
So I'll jump to Clément and then Guillaume.
Yes, of course, European preferences seems to be logical because other countries first do it, so we should do it. I would just one remark. Let's be sure that we do not pay at any price for anything. I guess it's as a taxpayer, let's pay the right price for the right services. And that being said, it's also a way to tailor the European company to address the worldwide market. I totally agree with you that if we work all together in Europe to create this shield with the right services at the right prices, it means that we could export it. And we could resell the same subsystems, the same services to Asia-Pacific countries, to other part of the world. So we could win on both bands, create a strong European defense industry, space and defense industry, and create worldwide actors. And it must be finely tailored, but it could happen.
Yeah, of course. Guillaume, you wanted to respond.
Yeah, it's on the EU sovereignty. I think it's clear to all of us today that we need this EU sovereignty, meaning different things. So first, we need assets. I mean, we've seen the day Musk was about to shut down Starlink, so we were unable to kind of step in, right? Then we had some blackmailing from the US about supplying Ukraine with intelligence-based and Earth observation that we were unable as well to, at the time we were unable to step in. So we have clear gaps, loopholes that we need to fill in. So we need assets. That's number one. Number two, we need as well to have the freedom to use those assets the way we want. It's very nice to buy sometimes assets from across the board, but if you don't have the freedom to use the assets the way you want, it's a limited, if not an empty sovereignty, right? So what we want is full sovereignty. So meaning having the means and capacities to use assets the way our member states want to use those assets. And that's why in the defense program, we are so strict in terms of eligibility conditions, in terms of where the entities are located, where are their headquarters, who is having the decisive influence on the company, because we want that company to be able to supply over long term, right? We have conditions related to the products, so having the possibility to change technologies or components that are subject to restrictions, precisely to have freedom in terms of using those capabilities. So we are not talking too much about EU preference, but the way we're crafting regulations on EU defense programs, it's exactly that, the outcome. And we're pushing to the maximum. Not always easy with certain member states, but we're getting there. And we have similar eligibility rules on the EU space program. So, and clearly because we want to invest in capacities that will provide security. And I think in terms of acceptability, public acceptability, considering the mass of money we're going to invest in the years to come, we need to be able to justify to citizens that we're not just creating jobs, but we're indeed achieving security for ourselves.
Marjolijn, I think you want to say something, but I think I also want to ask perhaps more, because earlier you mentioned NATO, and obviously, I mean, I understand that there are eligibility criteria for defense and space, but then when you ask a lot of member states, they will say, yes, I'm happy to buy European, but then the system that I buy, if it's a defense system, the operationalization will go through NATO. So there is always that thing, and as we know, NATO, whether we like it or not, is heavily American. I mean, we've seen over the past 2 weeks, there were discussions about the collapse of NATO because suddenly the US decided it might be time to actually invade an ally. So this NATO, EU defense space thing, how do we put all of that together and make sure that we keep full sovereignty over these assets?
That's indeed one of the challenges before us. Davos was referenced. I think President von der Leyen was there also very clear that we need to take more responsibility as Europeans. It's urgent. There is a war at our doorstep. So we need to move forward. And of course, it's clear that we want to have an autonomy over the assets that we develop as Europeans. I'm not sure that will translate into European preference or other methods of doing that. I think that's open for discussion with member states. And that's exactly why we need to start with the user needs of our military. How are they going to use the systems, and therefore what type of criteria do we need? Indeed, security of supply chains, the integrity of communication links, etc. Many of the EU defense organizations are also working in NATO, and they will need to make sure their assets can also be used in that context. So when member states develop national assets, it's natural that they look at the NATO standards. I think our challenge will be to ensure that interoperability, so that these systems can talk to each other, but that as EU, as Europe, we maintain our own capacity so that we can do what we need to do when we want to do it. There also might be many cases where the EU might have needs separate of those of NATO. So we also need to prepare for that situation. But there are standards and interoperability. Once we have that, I think there is a lot of room to determine what assets to use when and where for our member states. And then that also translates in what do we want to use as EU, what do we want to do together, and what do we want to keep separate. And I also briefly wanted to share Rafa's optimism. I think we can do it. We have fantastic industries in Europe. We have the knowledge. We have the history. I think it's clear that we also have the ambition. It's just indeed the how, and we need to get it right.
And if I can switch gear a little bit. So you mentioned, obviously, earlier, but it's a case for pretty much every space company, that there is a dual use element. But here we're talking about defense, right? And we're seeing, obviously, that governments, the EU is saying now space is crucial for future conflict, for defense, for all of that. But how does that impact your business on a day-to-day basis? The divide between dual use and defense, or even does that impact in any sort of way perhaps access to financing or anything? Because I cover defense a lot, and I've had defense companies telling me that actually they've had to switch gears very quickly because a supplier suddenly had lost access to financing because of rules that prevented financing for defense companies. So does that impact you in any way, the fact that you're now looking into developing or doing more and more services for defense? Clément, if you want to kick us off.
Yes, that's an interesting point, because a few years ago, and a very few years ago, defense was a bad word in finance. Last time I raised money, it was almost 2 years ago, and to be honest, the majority of the funds I was speaking with at some time closed the door because of the potential defense application of Unseenlabs. So first, thank you to the funds who followed us and we had no problem on that. But, second point, nowadays, each fund has a defense pocket. It's not a problem anymore to finance defense. So clearly it has changed on this part. And on the business model, for sure, space is dual use by necessity. It's dual use. We have pure private and pure ungovernmental customers. And we were on the, once again, a few years ago, we were on the edge to have 50-50 defense and non-defense applications. To be honest, with the last 2 years of geopolitical troubles and challenges, clearly we see a huge potential in defense and far more fundings on the government side and the will to accelerate worldwide, not just in Europe, but clearly worldwide. So clearly defense is a major part of our business to date. For us, it's quite easy because we are a service provider. We sell geo-intelligence, so it's quite easy, you can move on. But yes, truth is space is dual use, but it's driven nowadays clearly by defense.
Anybody else want to, Jaume?
We have to see it just on the, not as a disadvantage, but an advantage. We have to take a look of what countries like US is doing. Defense funds is the way to speed up development that for dual. Then telecommunication from space, it's a technology that it may be applied to connect a soldier or to connect an environmental sensor. Then to have all this capacity, all this financial capacity to deploy all these assets in the sky, it could be a huge advantage for all the non-defense applications.
Michel.
Yes, so at Lookup, we are dual use by nature. It's our DNA. Well, it's by the position of the founders, one from the civilian world, one from the military world. We address use cases from both worlds. We have clients on both worlds as well. I have to say that today, our customers are mainly government, defense, and institutional customers. So the private sector is not mature enough today and is not ready to pay for collision avoidance services, space traffic management, but the time will come. We are convinced of that, but this is dual by nature. But today, business is mainly defense and governmental.
Guillaume.
I'm not going to talk about my company, but just talking about the investors, because indeed, I mean, I think there was a big shift over the last years, months, in terms of defense as not closing anymore access to finance, but actually being very well perceived by investors. So, I mean, as you know, we're working very closely with European investment funds to create fund of funds. We are scouting the markets. The IF is investing in funds. We've done that in defense already, and their pipeline of funds is huge. I mean, basically, the envelope we gave to the EIF now is done and was absorbed in a couple of months, and they have plenty of other funds in the pipeline that they cannot invest in. So there is a huge traction currently in Europe for defense. Of course, I mean, because there are big contracts coming up, so the investors are very attracted by that. But so there is, on one side, clearly big flow of investors, highly interested in investing into defense. And two, we've provided clarification, including for the banks, on how to operate in the field of defense. So here again, with the support of the EIB, but we've done a lot, be it on the side of the investment or the side of the regulatory framework, to ensure that now we would have much more private financing in support of defense business. So be it civilian companies willing to open up defense business, or defense companies willing to extend its defense business. So today, really, I mean, we are at a situation where there is a big shift, and defense being perceived as very attractive by investors.
Another point on dual use, I guess, is that, you know, primarily you might have started as civil companies, right, or provided commercial services, and now you're finding yourself working more and more with MODs, etc. How does that change the way you approach your product? And I'm talking here about, for instance, resilience, because we're hearing now, we heard that today from the German Secretary of Defense, that conflict is now in space, right? We're having actors who are trying to destabilize European assets in space. This could be your assets, right? So if you are to take part in shielding Europe, if you want to help that effort, how does that change your approach to your product? Is there resilience elements that you now have to think of, and how do you come about doing that? I don't know who wants, Lubos.
Yeah, maybe I go with that. For us, it hasn't necessarily changed the product, but we have looked at different aspects of it. Right? For optical communications, it has the advantage of our product being what we call low probability of interception, LPI, and LPD, low probability of detection. This gives not only high bandwidth, as we used to sell it before to the commercial side, but now to the more military and to the resilient aspect of it, right? Is where they look at, okay, can I have a stealthy set of communications, right? Can I have a link that you cannot detect, you cannot jam, unlike what you have in RF, right? So it's looking at different aspects of the product, right? And seeing how they help our customers, right? And how they help them create resilient solutions and resilient communication.
Jaume, you wanted to say something?
Yes, of course, the satellite that you use to connect agriculture sensors in the middle of nowhere, and the sensor that we connect, and the satellite that we connect, so it cannot be the same. Okay? Then this is an evolution. In our case, we have a base which is the standard. Then we believe that a standard is the way to connect not just the civil but also the defense assets. And then inside the standard we have to move as much as possible, but without breaking the capability of using standardized devices on the ground. Then this is a restriction, but at the same time it's an advantage. But yes, it's an evolution in order to allow standard devices using, for example, the frequency hopping, which is not, it's in the standard, but it's not implemented, but it could be implemented inside without breaking it in order to be as resilient as possible in electronic world. Inside the standard, will never be the same, okay? A device or a waveform designed from scratch to be a defense waveform, it will never be, it will always be better, okay, than one that is not designed for this specific use. But a lot of things could be done, and there is a huge advantage in the massification on the other side.
Rafel, go for it.
I think that in order to build resilience, we need to look at it at system level, at satellite level, and at subsystem level. At system level, there is one thing that is critical, and it's numbers. I mean, I'm from Spain. We lost Spain NGSat, an exquisite asset in geo, but that unfortunately has not been able to serve. That's dependency on a single point of failure, right? If you have a constellation with a diverse system with many capabilities, you remove one of the key risks, which is having a single point of failure. Then you can also build resilience at the satellite level. And here's where you think very carefully about how do you configure those satellites, what sort of protocols you use, what sort of standards and best practices from the defense industry you apply. And then you even bring that at subsystem level. What are the electronics? Where do you procure them from? How do you integrate them? How do you test them? Where is your entire supply chain? Right? So all of these are things that need to be taken into account. And I would like to link that with one of the questions that you also did before. Is it a disadvantage to have standards and processes defined rigorously from the defense sector? No, we have to be very humble. We have to learn from those that take care of our safety, and we have to show them everything that we are capable of for them to tell us, this is good, this is not good enough, I need this that way, and so on. And believe me, when there is needs like the ones that we are experiencing right now in the border, or when there is needs like a flood killing 400 people in 3 hours, like it happened in Valencia a year and a half ago, those are real needs that move people to take the right decision, and the red tape goes off immediately, right, when you deal with those needs. And unfortunately, we live in a moment of huge need in Europe. So I trust dearly everyone from the defense sector that is saying, you really need to comply with this. This is very important. And we say, off we go and we'll do our work based just pat it.
Maybe 30 seconds on this, and maybe 30 seconds to conclude from me, if you want.
Okay.
30 seconds. Obviously, the needs are basically the same regarding space safety, meaning SSA or SDA, but the requirements in the details are different. There are specific requirements regarding safety of the system, integrity of the system, confidentiality, interoperability, cyber security for the military users. So we designed the platform to be used in a cloud-based mode for the private companies, private operators, but we designed it to be deployed on-premise as a command and control system for space domain awareness for the government players, which is different from the beginning. The sooner you take into account these requirements, these constraints, the better it is. Just a few words to conclude for me, because I think there are 5 minutes left, but I would like to say that when I mentioned the difference between the agile emerging company, young companies, and the big primes, I do not oppose the two of them. And what I see is that what works the best is to partner with big ones. And this is what we are trying to do with Lookup, to partner with, Thales, Leonardo, Airbus, Safran, whoever, because this is where we have the agility, the product, and they have the mass, and the security. They give confidence to the final customer. The other point is, just to finish with this, in my opinion, because this discussion was very interesting, I was a little bit provocative, but I think that the glass is not empty at all. It is half full, and now we have the water close to the glass, and the objective is to pour the water not next to the glass, but in the glass.
All right, thank you. Well, in the interest of time, you're right, we only have 4 minutes, and there's many of you here, so maybe let's just ask one quick question, and then you each answer a bit like the first question. So, if you had to change one thing in the European space policy in order for this space shield to be successful within the next 5 years, what would it be? I'll ask all of you. Whether it's on the institutional side or on the industrial side or the political side, what do you think is the one thing that is right now hindering speed and the successful rollout of this shield?
I'll go first. For me, it's very simple. Just hand out the contracts. Let's just go, right? Like, you might not get it right the first time, but that's how we do it, right? That's how we improve.
Hand out contract, Clément?
It's obviously linked to contracts. But how do we accelerate the usage of services and actual operational thing in space? That's a big question.
Okay.
Yeah, on my side, okay, what I think that we have to change in Europe is the risk aversion. As startups, we are there. We are much more faster and innovative than users. Okay, I think that this is what it changed from US or Europe, is that they use small startups in order to deploy large programs with all the securities and all the parameters I needed. But startups is the solution to be faster and to be innovative as we need.
Rafel?
Going to say two things very quickly, because I'm cheeky. Use what you have, but procure what you need. So look at what you need, procure it, but make sure that right now you use what there is already.
For me, I would say we must improve the procurement process and cycle to make them more agile, quicker, and much easier. And also to improve the culture of the risk acceptance by the procurement in agencies, whatever they are.
Now's your chance to either take a shot at member states or at industries. Is there one thing that you wish could be changed in the way Europe approaches space and the space shield that you think needs to be amended within the next 5 years?
That's a good
difficult
question.
from the
No,
Commission.
I think it's we may aim for the most perfect solution. I think it's like let's do things, have kind of vision, have ensure interoperability, and then plug different elements. I mean, that space shield will not be like a fully new system. I mean, I think we need to. It's about building, about what we have. It's about including. It's a bit of a plug and play, right, approach. So that we need to have in mind, so that we can onboard solutions as we run, basically. So I think that's for me should be the approach when it comes to this space defense flagship.
Marjolijn, if you want to have the last word.
My wish would be to speed up our intergovernmental processes. I'd like the discussion to start in council as soon as possible, so that we know what we want, and that industry can get to work to build for whoever will be the user, whether it be an institutional user, an intergovernmental, or a national user. But we need to get on with that. So I hope we can improve our speed.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Right, I hope you found this as insightful as I have. If you wouldn't mind giving a round of applause to our speakers. And thank you very much. Thank you, guys.